The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. And thank you all for joining us for this Q&A on Waterkeeper Alliance's Visionaries episode. We wish you all good health and safety in this challenging time. My name is Mark Yagi. I'm Executive Director of Waterkeeper Alliance. And I'm thrilled to be here with Rachel Silverstein, Miami Waterkeeper. Rachel wants to give a wave. And also Bruno Montefiore, the Marignan Waterkeeper. Bruno. As well as Maya Raposo, Waterkeeper Alliance's Communications and Marketing Director, who is our moderator and is not on screen. So I'm going to give a little bit of background information, but I want to mention first that if you have questions during this broadcast, please put them in the chat feature, and Maya will be reviewing them. And also, this airing is going to be recorded, so if you miss anything, it will be available afterwards. So to get started, for those of you who are new to us, Waterkeeper Alliance is a global organization that unites more than 300 locally based clean water advocacy organizations and focuses citizen action on issues that affect our waterways, from pollution to climate change. There are currently 353 waterkeepers in 48 countries, and they patrol and protect more than 2.8 million square miles of watersheds. And these are women and men like Rachel and Bruno, who are working to protect everyone's right to clean water. And to be sure, our waterways are threatened. Hard-fought protections for our waterways are under assault. But we also know that at Waterkeeper Alliance, we've built an effective model for local action. And that model that we've built is being recognized on an episode of The Visionaries. And that episode is airing this summer on PBS stations across the United States. And our Visionaries episode features Waterkeeper Alliance, Miami Waterkeeper, and Marignan Waterkeeper. As actor Sam Waterston, who's the host of the series, says, the central ideas of the Visionaries, doing what you can about huge, intractable problems, is an idea worth encouraging. And that's exactly what Rachel and Bruno are doing. And so I'm thrilled to be here with both of them virtually today to talk about their work. So let's get started. We're going to hear from, welcome Rachel and Bruno.
Thank you for the invitation.
Starting with Rachel, could you please tell us how you came to join the Waterkeeper movement?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually interned in college for what was then the San Diego Coastkeeper. Now it's called the San Diego Coastkeeper, and then it was the Baykeeper. And it was the year that all of the Waterkeepers got together for their conference in San Diego. So I actually got to help plan the conference and meet Waterkeepers from all over the world. And I was super inspired by all the amazing work that they were doing, and hearing the stories about how they gave a voice to their watersheds and had such an impact. And so years later, I graduated college and ended up going to graduate school in Miami, and there was no Waterkeeper there. And so I thought, oh, we really need a Waterkeeper here in Miami. And when I graduate, maybe I'll start one. And then while I was in graduate school, somebody started one, and Alexis Siegel, and I thought, she stole my dream. But I got in touch with her, and we became close friends, and I ended up helping her with some of her work. And eventually I did a fellowship in DC working for the Senate on the Ocean Subcommittee. And she was actually transitioning from Waterkeeper to move to DC as my fellowship was ending. So it worked out to come back and sort of swap cities with her and to come and take over at Miami Waterkeeper. So it was like, I think about a 10-year arc between my internship and actually becoming a Waterkeeper. And now I've been a Waterkeeper in Miami for almost 6 years.
That's amazing. I remember that conference in San Diego.
That was a lot of fun.
2003, I believe.
That sounds about right. It was somewhere around 2003.
Any Waterkeeper conference where we get to all go out and learn how to surf is a fun conference too.
I know, and we were hopeful that everybody was going to come to Miami this year in early June for the Waterkeeper conference here, but of course, COVID had other plans. But maybe we can regroup on that and introduce everybody to our watershed next time.
I hope so, because I know everyone missed being in Miami. And well, speaking of surfing, I know Bruno likes to surf. So how about you, Bruno? Tell us how you came to join the Waterkeeper movement.
Well, I've been working in this organization called the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law. I studied environmental law, so it was a great fit to join this organization. The Peruvian Society for Environmental Law I would say it's one of the most powerful NGOs in Peru, focused on policy and law. Most of the laws and policies that have been approved by the government have been processes where we have been involved. And 7 years ago, I saw that most of the conservation projects were still being managed by people that, like, if you were a normal citizen, you couldn't engage so easily into conservation initiatives. So I thought that there was a real opportunity and a gap to make conservation more democratic. At that moment, we created an initiative called Conservamos por Naturaleza. It's in English, it would be something like we conserve for nature, or it's in our nature to conserve. It's based on the concept of biophilia from E.O. Wilson, one of the people that have inspired me a lot. And we started doing all these campaigns where we would facilitate citizen engagement, because we really believe like citizen-led projects are the way to go for conservation. So we were doing these different events and we had these initiatives running. And during this process, a kayaker, an Australian kayaker called Ben, came one day to our offices. And Ben was really inspired because he had been kayaking in the Marañón River, and he had learned that the river was going to be dammed. There were 20 projects declared as of national interest in that moment. So he came to the offices because he had reached our NGOs and he was looking for support to try to stop these dams. And basically he came and said, hey, we need to save this river. Everyone in Peru knows about the Marañón. It's one of the most important rivers, but I had never heard at all about the Marañón Canyon. And that was the place where Ben showed me all the pictures. It's a stunning place, beautiful area. And then he started telling me about all the people that would be displaced. So at that moment, we started doing all this research and created a campaign to engage young Peruvians into protecting this river. Years went by and continued making partnerships and alliances to make our voice louder and stronger. We came to Waterkeeper Alliance, and definitely has helped us a lot to create more connections and collaboration with other people doing the same things around the world.
Excellent. And I'm curious, is there a strong network of environmental lawyers in Peru, or is it a big group of environmental lawyers there, or so is it a small group?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I will say there's around 50 environmental lawyers that are working on these issues. But we're also working with other disciplines. There's like, within the organizations, there's anthropologists, journalists, so many people, no? So I will say that there's a consistent number of people working on it, but it's still a niche movement. I think one of the challenges is how do we make conservation become something that everyone is involved with? And we're still not there, definitely. We still need to make it mainstream.
Okay. Well, Rachel, would you tell us how you would describe the role of a waterkeeper?
Yeah, there are a lot of different shoes that waterkeepers fill for our communities. And, we often describe it, much like Waterkeeper Alliance does, as giving a voice to a watershed, or being the spokesperson for a body of water in the community and the environment that relies upon it. And I sort of think of it as being, part scientist, part investigator, part lawyer, part part community organizer, and general advocate on behalf of our watershed. And here in Miami, we focus primarily on clean water issues, but also habitat and habitat protection issues, which for us here are coral reefs, mangroves, wetlands, dunes, and of course seagrasses. And then sea level rise is a huge issue that we work on too. So we're really involved in everything from, protecting wild areas to like dealing with sewage treatment plants and nuclear power plants and things like that too. So it really it does take a diverse skill set and diverse staff skill sets and coalition building to get all the expertise we need to deal with all these different issues.
A lot of hats to wear. There was a friend of mine who used to work at Waterkeeper Alliance and went off to start a school that was sort of founded on the Waterkeeper model of teaching the kids all of the traditional courses, but then enhancing the learning through the lens of protecting New York Harbor. And he always said what inspired him to do that was working with Hudson Riverkeeper and Waterkeeper Alliance. When he was with the Hudson Riverkeeper, he said, there's so many hats you have to wear that I learned more in that 1 year when I was an AmeriCorps volunteer with Hudson Riverkeeper than I did all through college because of all the different hats you have to wear.
Wow. Yeah, no, it's true though. I never thought I would know so much about septic tanks, for example. And I'm not a lawyer, but I sometimes feel like I play one on TV.
Right, exactly. Bruno, what about you? How do you describe the role?
I'll say the same. I think you're kind of like a jack of all trades, but I would like to highlight the fact that you have to also, like, when you are doing activist work, like holding polluters accountable and trying to stop things that are not right, I think you have a really good mission and you engage much more people when you also have a good vision of how things should be. How, like, if you have the capacity to say how things could be more beautiful, how things could be better. And I think that is what, like, there's a lot of people that are haters and want to like engage and, like, okay, this person is doing this thing and it's this the polluter and let's join and forces and combat that thing. But for me, the ones that stay for longer connected with the team are the ones that understand the vision of how we can use our lives and time to make things better, and creating that vision, I think, is quite crucial for a waterkeeper.
Really well said. And let's follow up on some of this jack of all trades and all the different hats, and talk about sort of maybe give a little insight on your, Rachel, your day-to-day work, and tell us, some of the highlights, the lowlights, or what do you do in a typical week?
Well, these days it is not so exciting as maybe it once was. As we're all
pre-COVID.
You want pre-COVID day. Yeah, so as following on, as you said, the theme of jack of all trades, in the same day you could be talking to elementary school kids and a senator, or be in court and also at a beach cleanup in the same week. And so it's very varied, from, like, this sounds cheesy, but from business suits to like wetsuits, literally, sometimes in the same week. There is more work at the computer than most people would think, and I was actually looking for a quote. Somebody has a quote on the bottom of their email that I loved about, for every wild area that you love, like, somebody had to sit behind a desk for years to like make that to protect that space for you. And I couldn't find it before tonight, but I always think about that because there is a lot of writing technical comments or doing research, and something we've tried to get better about also is communicating the work that we're doing with the public, because sometimes we're so busy doing the work that we don't share it. And so we're trying to tell those stories better, because there are great stories from the work. And my staff actually this week forced me to start my own Instagram account. So I now have an Instagram account where I'm supposed to be posting what I do in a week, so people can see. So check that out. I think it's Miami Waterkeeper _Rachel. I only have posted like 6 things, but that'll give you an idea of action alerts and ways to get involved. We recently got a boat as well, so and we have done before boat patrols that you can see in the episode as well with local school here, Ransom Everglades, where we go out and sample and patrol with them. There's scuba diving, there's water sampling, there's investigating pollution reports that happens a lot, and then there's meetings with attorneys, with student groups, and then working on outreach campaigns as well. So it is very varied and definitely changes day to day where our focus is.
Never boring.
It is never boring.
How about you, Bruno?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar. Like you're just doing different things, and it goes from research, outreach, politics, and engagement. No, and maybe one of the most important thing is creating and nurturing partnerships. No, because sometimes in those partnerships you find opportunities and are the ones that can change the game, even with partnerships that you initially didn't thought that were going to be so important. So I think you always have to give the hand, because at some point, like, it could be that hand that it's gonna like change your game and the battle. Like this week we're doing, for instance, just to show a little bit of how a week works, looks like. We're now with COVID, but it's definitely more time doing research, reading documents, understanding things, meeting with people. Then we're doing different storytelling products that we can use to get more outreach, from a documentary to a written piece to a short video for media. No, so I think it's definitely just like being engaged in the issue, being like completely aware of everything that is happening, and knowing who are the players, really knowing your watershed and who are the stakeholders and where everyone is going, so that you can pull those strings together and great collaboration happen when needed. No?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think just building on what Bruno said too, I never realized how important marketing was for this kind of work too. Like I was just thinking about the biology piece of it, but you really have to work hard to share the work with people in a way that is engaging to get people to care about these really important issues.
Well, you did a nice job plugging your Instagram, so hopefully that'll make your team happy.
But I need help with it. I'm not great at it.
And I should say I got to see Rachel in action wearing her different hats back in February, just before, within the pre-COVID days, from meeting with her team and then going to a town, I guess it was a town board meeting to talk about fertilizer restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
And getting a piece of an ordinance or a piece of legislation that the Miami Waterkeeper team had been taking from town to town to get enacted with quite success, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it passed. And then right before everything shut down, that was at the village of Key Biscayne. The city of Miami, literally that afternoon, everything shut down after this vote unanimously voted to pass the strongest fertilizer ordinance in Florida. So we're happy about that. And now we're working on all the outreach materials with them to share with people what the new requirements are. So I'm just very happy that you guys were able to be there for that.
Yeah, it was fun. So wearing lots of different hats, jack of all trades, but let's dig into like what's the biggest battle you're currently waging. Start with you, Rachel.
There's a couple big ones going on, but I think probably the toughest issue that we're working on right now is dealing with our friendly neighborhood nuclear power plant, Turkey Point, which is located at the southern end of Biscayne Bay. It's essentially wedged in between two national parks, Everglades National Park and Biscayne National Park. That's kind of carved out of Biscayne National Park. And there are tons of problems with the plant. It has a cooling system that's like basically like a giant radiator of unlined cooling canals that were built in the 1970s, and contamination from the cooling canal system is leaching into the groundwater and spreading out, and including showing up now, we know, in Biscayne Bay. So there's tons of issues related to that plume of contaminated water that's spreading, including threatening the drinking water supply for the Florida Keys, contaminating Biscayne Bay, and they are currently, well, this cooling canal system also became the ideal habitat for the American crocodile, which is an Endangered Species Act listed crocodile, and populations of this crocodile grew in this cooling canal system until to be the second largest in Florida. But through a series of events, the ecosystem, so to speak, in the canal system collapsed, and the crocodile population has collapsed as well. So there's an endangered species issues there that we're looking at. And then a big part of the problem is that this power plant is already on its second extension of its operating license. So it's supposed to now be shut down in 2032. And they're trying to extend the operating license of the plant until 2052, which would make it the oldest operating nuclear power plant in the world. And no one has ever run a nuclear power plant for 80 years. So this is compounded with the fact that this area is predicted to be underwater, and this cooling canal system is predicted to be underwater by 2040, under best case scenario, because of sea level rise. So for us, this is a huge concern, and we have joined up with some national groups to actually challenge this license extension before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So we're currently involved in litigation there, and basically the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not considering sea level rise as an issue that they will look at in giving these operating licenses, which for us is very shocking, because this is like a key existential, giant blinking red arrow of a problem. And for some reason, we just cannot get traction, or have not yet been able to get traction to really get people to think about the sea level rise connection with this nuclear power plant. So we're working really hard on building out that campaign now, as well as the legal piece that we're working on too. So there's a whole host of issues related to that plant, but those are really the key ones.
And issues around Nuclear Regulatory Commission and nuclear issues are rather complicated, right?
I'm not a lawyer, but sometimes I say, like, I feel like I play one on TV. But going through this Nuclear Regulatory Commission process, it is mind-blowing how tilted the whole thing is towards industry. It's actually quite shocking. Like, even down to how the procedures work in court. Like, they get 60 pages to respond to an issue, and we get 5, stuff like that.
Right.
So, a lot of the folks on our team, like, all they do is deal with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and it's unbelievably complicated and unbelievably difficult to intervene and to really make a difference there, unless you're part of industry in the nuclear industry. So actually, what's happened was they granted the license to Turkey Point to continue to extend the operating license in the middle of our appeal before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So they hadn't even finished hearing the appeal before they gave them the license, and that actually jumped us into federal court. So we're now in the appellate court in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, challenging that decision right now.
Gotcha. I can't help get it. I can't get the picture out of my head of it was alligators, right? In the canal?
Crocodiles.
Crocodiles.
The American crocodile.
I'm picturing the probably this is getting too deep into my personal TV preferences, but I'm thinking of Blinky the three-eyed fish who lived in the cooling pond behind Homer the Simpsons in Nuclear Power. I'm picturing now a three-eyed crocodile. Bruno, what about you?
There's actually a great Simpsons cartoon in front of that plant that says, I can't remember the name of the plant, but it says the name of the plant, and then it says, still operating thanks to a lengthy appeals process. Which is like, I feel like we're living.
Yes, indeed. Bruno, tell us about your biggest challenge, your biggest battle you're currently waging.
Yeah, I'll say, like, for us, the biggest battle is to keep the Marañón River free flowing at this stage. I think in the future we have to look more about the pollution in the river, but right now it's more about keeping the river free flowing. And for each one of you that has heard for the first time about the Marañón River, like you have to understand that there's only 6 major rivers connecting the Andes with the Amazon. So you have like these 2 amazing ecological complex ecosystems, the Andes and the Amazon, and there's these 6 major rivers providing sediments, connecting fish through really long migration routes, indigenous knowledge, and for 5 of these 6 major rivers, there are plans to dam them. One of them is the Marañón River. It's the source of the Amazon. It has the longest migratory fish from agua dulce, from freshwater, in freshwaters, the longest fish migration, and it's a key watershed for the Amazon basin itself. There have been 50 projects declared as of national interest in this river. From these 20 projects declared of national interest, 5 had progress, and at the moment, one, which is a hydroelectric center of Paso, with free-flowing river, that has been built in 2008, and it was the smallest of everyone. And we focused all our work on the largest dams. 2 of them had concession contracts, but have not started operations right now. And we are in the middle of all the battle to get those contracts annulled. And there's 2 more projects that are still on the process of getting investors. So right now, if we focus on the battle, is just making the statement of why the Marañón has to remain free-flowing and convince all the different agencies that that is the best decision for Peru. No, I can build more on that, but maybe I can say the next things on the next questions, maybe.
Sure. What and 20 projects? That's that's a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely. The good thing is that honestly, like the costs of dams are so high that it's quite unlikely that the 20 of them would be built, of course. And if they will be built, the Marañón will fail to exist. Like it would just become a series of reservoirs because it's one after the other. And one of the problems is that all the environmental impact assessments are being analyzed on an individual basis instead of looking at the river on a more integral way. So we think like for these very strategic and important rivers, that should be a case, that you look at the river basin as a whole, and then you can understand what's the best scenario for the watershed, no? But that's not what is happening right now yet, and that's what we're working for.
Yeah. Otherwise, it's like you're playing that. I don't know if you know the game Whack-A-Mole, but you have to stand there and try to, and all the little moles come out of the holes, and you keep trying to beat them down. These projects keep popping up. Like, get back down. What about so let's talk about something more celebratory. How about the biggest victory you've ever had? Rachel, what can you tell us about your biggest victory?
For us, we worked for almost 5 years fighting a dredging project in the Port of Miami that was also discussed in the Visionaries episode, where they dredge the Port of Miami, and then the shipping channel actually goes out into the ocean a bit and crosses our coral reef. That's the Florida Reef Tract that runs north and south along the eastern edge of Florida. And the Army Corps destroyed over 200 acres, or over 250 acres of coral reef, like over 200 football fields worth of coral reef, essentially. And killed what we estimate to be almost 1 million corals in that dredging project. And the outcome of it was, we got some coral restoration done, which we're proud of. But really, we shone a light on this disaster that was happening in this project, and the government denied it for so long. And then finally, towards the end, couldn't deny it anymore and started admitting it. And we're now seeing like concrete changes and policies to protect coral reefs during future dredging projects. And in fact, the Army Corps biologist that was working on the project has now been indicted and actually pled guilty to lying to federal investigators and taking money from the contractors that were working on the project. So that led to some institutional change within the Army Corps as well. And they are now planning to go just about 30 miles north to another dredging project that crosses the reef tract again up in Fort Lauderdale at a place called Port Everglades. And we sued there because they didn't learn any lessons from the Miami project when they were trying to push the environmental impact statement there through. And we forced them to stop and redo all of their environmental assessments. And the project has now been put on pause. They were planning to start that project in 2017, and now it won't start before 2021, but most likely even later. So we've gotten already a large delay on that project, and we'll wait and see when the new environmental documents come out, if they're sufficient, and if they're insufficient, we'll sort of reactivate the litigation and make sure that either the project won't happen unless the reefs are protected.
A big victory, and in all of the intrigue with the corruption.
It's been very intriguing.
Yeah. Bruno, what about you?
Well, I would say like right now the Marañón is still flowing free. So I think that's the main victory has been that so far in 2013 when we started this project, I honestly felt that it was really unlikely that we weren't going to be able to stop the dams. At that moment, the president itself had said that the projects were a priority. The main company behind at that moment 3 of the projects was the Brazilian company called Odebrecht, who maybe you might know about the Lava Jato case, the huge corruption scandal of this Brazilian company paying fees to several different governments around the world to get like benefits for their huge infrastructure projects. So they had all this power that was with them, but we were able to work with all these local communities that really make the stand and make their voice heard, and that they didn't want to have this project being being developed. And it made us win time. I have to say, like at that moment, it just made us win time. And after that, things have happened. Like the corruption scandal came out, so that was very beneficial for us because the Odebrecht didn't have all the power that they have in the past. And now we got to a point where both of the big dam companies that dam projects that are in the area, they have lost their environmental certification. And if they would need to build, they will still need to carry a new environmental impact assessment, a new participatory process. So during this time, what we've done is go to each village area, talk to each one of them, understand their motivations, and also like raise the concerns and voices that they have. And in some of these villages in the past, they were positive for the dams. They felt they were going to get more jobs and employment, but nobody had ever explained them what were the costs for them, and also for other people that live downstream in the river. And we have seen the change of many of these villages now actually becoming involved about the protection of the rivers and being advocates for the protection of this watershed. So I think one of the biggest battles is to change every person's perspective on what are dams going to do for their life and for neighboring communities. No, I think that the biggest victory is that it's like how during this process we've been having each time more hope that the Marañón would become like it's going to keep free flowing, and right now I think we have a unique opportunity to make a political statement and get a law that actually keeps it like that for the future, and so that we don't have to be, like you said in the game, like a firefighter going through all the different threats, but having like a more systemic approach to protecting the river. No?
Yeah, well, that's It was really, I enjoyed what you said there, because I think it's really important that a role that a lot of waterkeepers will play is when, as you were saying, when they come in, whether it's the dam builder, the dam company, or government, our government comes in and tells a community, oh, we're waving a big bag of money. There's going to be all these jobs. It's going to be amazing. Your life's going to be so much better. But to be able to come in and say, here's what they didn't tell you, and you need to think about this and how it's going to affect X, Y, and Z, and that's a really important role to play. Also incredibly impressive that it is still free flowing, because just from visiting with so many waterkeepers around the world and learning about the work that they do, there's not very many rivers that are free flowing anymore. And
just
so
crazy.
Crazy. And I wanted to I'm going to switch gears for just a second, because we do have a question from this one is for Bruno, and I'll read it. It's hi, my name is Lauren Paulette, and I'm an international relations and environmental studies student at Johns Hopkins University. Currently a marketing intern at Miami Waterkeeper, and I'm curious.
She made me do Instagram.
Did you get that plug, Lauren? I'm curious about environmental law in South America. I have a question for Bruno. Can you elaborate the political complexities surrounding the dam projects in Peru? And also a general question about Peruvian environmental law. Is there legislation in Peru that's comparable to the Clean Water Act in the United States?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for the interest, Lauren, and I just started following Rachel in Instagram, so you got. What are the complexities? I mean, like it's corruption is a huge issue, but just to explain how decisions are taken and what's one of the main challenges for us is that the decisions about damming a river like the Marañón, even when it touches on the lives of thousands of people and the whole Amazon basin, it's still being taken by one vice ministry, which is the Vice Ministry of Electricity within the Ministry for Energy and Mining, which is the most powerful ministry in Peru. So the complexities are that so far is that instead of really like having a strong planning process where you're looking at watersheds, where you're looking at energy itself, we still don't have like a process where you look at what is the energy plan for Peru for the next 20 years, and you have sustainability embedded as one of the main components. So I think one of the complexities is that there's not enough articulation and collaboration between different ministries. And the case of the Marañón highlights that perfectly, because if the dams would go ahead, they would dam rock paintings. You call them like that? The rock paints, like ancient rock paints that are 12,000 years old. But the Ministry of Culture hadn't done the proper studies yet to actually block the project. It has come throughout the project. We were able to take people from the Ministry for Culture to analyze and evaluate these rock paintings and petroglyphs. And now that's becoming one of the things that is stopping the dams. Then you have the Ministry for Tourism. The Marañón Canyon is raftable all year round. It has perfect class 3 to class 4 rapids in some areas, but most of them are class 2 and 3. It has these beautiful beaches where you can camp. The communities are welcoming, and there's a development of this tourism industry, but the Ministry for Tourism is not saying anything about this. No, so you have that, and at the same time, the other thing in Peru is that the decisions are taken mainly on the city of Lima. It's very centralized still, so the municipalities and the regional governments, they don't have so much power to define the decisions that are taken over the territories where they have responsibilities. That is the main reason why I'm Waterkeeper. I'm in Lima, but at the same time we do work on the Marañón. Like we travel to the Marañón and the river all throughout the year, especially with Ben and Luigi Marmanillo, who are like the people that have developed this enterprise to take people to the Marañón and promote the tourism. So we have this role where they are constantly on the river. I visit the river, but I'm mainly like working with the Congress, people at the Congress and the media, no? So because you need to talk to all these different people and stakeholders to make to engage them and see that the best option for Peru is not dam this river, no? About the question about the environmental law and the Clean Act, we do have a law for water, but it's far as strong as the Clean Water Act or the it's the Wildlife Act or the Wild Scenic Places Act, no, that you have in the States. So we have good laws, good environmental laws, but in terms of water, we still have to improve a lot, I think.
And you
Bruno,
kind
can
of,
I ask you a quick question? Do you
Yeah,
guys
sure.
have laws about government transparency? Like, can you get access to government documents and stuff like that? Because I remember going to visit the Bahamas Waterkeeper years ago, and they have no law like that, so they had a hard time even getting, you know, copies of permits and things like that. So, and I'm just so in awe of especially what the international waterkeepers go through to achieve such successes. So, you know, I'm curious how it works with government transparency where you are.
Yeah, so there's some laws on transparency which are applicable to all the different sectors, but then you have certain sectors like energy and mining that have that transparency and participation better regulated. I would have to say that electricity and mining have a better framework for that because they have been constantly had different social conflicts and they had to improve it to reduce those conflicts. Water, for instance, it's not in the same, like the water management is within the Ministry for Agriculture, no? And they don't have such a good transparency portal or mechanisms as you can find it in the mining and energy sector. But it's improving, I would say. It's not ideal, but it's getting better.
and Bruno, you touched upon this a little bit in your talking about the beautiful beaches and all the different parts of the river and your trips down there, which ties into two questions that we have for you. And then we've also got a couple of questions for Rachel. So to stay in that theme that you have, Bruno, that one of the questions from Cindy Ann Bowers was, how do you engage the people who live near the Marañón since the river's so long? And I think a related question is from Logan Sands, a rising senior at Pembroke Pines Charter High School, who's wanting to know how you went about informing the locals about the repercussions of the project. So I think those questions are kind of tied together, and maybe you could address those two at once, and then we've got a couple for Rachel coming up.
Sure, and thanks again for being here and asking these questions. I will say that we focus on two ways. First, the people that would be impacted directly from the dams, and those are directly the villages that would be flooded and people would have to be displaced. So with them, they basically were asked for. So we just went to see if the processes were developed on the good way, if they had the space to participate and make their voice heard. We also talked to all the municipalities that could have a point of view on these processes and could talk to the ministries saying what is their position. But then how do you engage the people that are not going to be directly affected, but that they would be indirectly affected? And I think there you have to raise some flags. For instance, there was this really big cooperative. It was this community that is focused on growing coffee, and they're the 5th exporters of coffee in Peru. And they didn't realize that if the dam was going to be built, maybe that was going to change the microclimate, and that could have repercussions on the core coffee plant, on the coffee plantations. You had all the indigenous communities that live in the lower Marañón, and they were not consulted. They were not asked during the process if they were in favor or against the process. But if you block the sediments that come from the Marañón, their whole agricultural practices depend on these sediments coming down the river and setting down, and then you have these areas that during the dry season, that's where they put their plants and crops. So it was just making explicit these impacts. The same with the fish. 80% of the protein from some of these indigenous communities is fish, the protein that they eat. And if you would block these migration routes for fish, they will be also indirectly affected. So with indigenous communities, what you need to do is they have federations, and you have to speak to the leaders of each federation. And then you have a national coordinator that unites regions and the country. So it's also like following the processes and going through all these like already like these governance that they have created.
Thank you, Bruno. And Rachel, it's a comment for you. Maybe you can comment on it. It says, Rachel, I heard they're going to dredge the port of Miami again for larger cruise ships.
So there is indeed another Port Miami expansion project planned. They have not even yet done a formal impact assessment from the last project that ended in 2015. Or created a comprehensive restoration plan for that. So that's something that we're fighting for as well. And before they've even done that, they're hoping to dredge again. I don't believe it's actually for the cruise ships though. It's for larger like supersized shipping vessels, so that they can come in through the expanded Panama Canal. And this planned project is estimated to be even larger than the last project that caused all of that damage. So you can imagine that we're not pleased that they are pushing ahead with yet another expansion project before they've even done the restoration that they were supposed to do to fix the damage from the last one. So we are awaiting more documents on that, but stay tuned, especially through our social media channels for action alerts and ways to make your voice heard as that project comes back through public comment period.
It's incredibly frustrating when you fight so hard to save something and restore something, and then they just come right back in with another project.
Yeah.
We do have another question for you, or two, Rachel. This is Linda Carso, and she says, you spoke about the legal battle on the licensing renewal for the nuclear power plant and talked about having in the judicial system, everything being tilted towards the benefit of the nuclear industry. Question, are we not always up against money, power of big business?
Usually. That's the case. So we often find ourselves as a small nonprofit. Right now, we are the largest that we have ever been with a staff of 7, which feels huge for us because it was just me for 2 years, and then just myself and our staff attorney, who's now our general counsel, Kelly Cox, for another 2 years. So we're happy to have a staff of 7, but we are still a very, very small nonprofit, especially compared to some of these large interests that we often find ourselves butting heads with. So I think what's inspiring for me and very empowering for me that I've learned in this process is, again, as I mentioned, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a marine biologist by training, but just the fact that our small organization can go to court and can get like the federal government into court, and we have the same rights, and or this very large power company, Florida Power and Light, and we all have to play by the same rules. What has been surprising for me with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in particular, though, is that it's not as even a playing field as I would expect, being more used to being in like state or federal court and seeing how things work there. And it's one of these strange courts within an agency, like an administrative court. And Nuclear Regulatory Commission has, Nuclear Regulatory Commission staff that sit next to the industry folks and make arguments on their behalf, essentially, is what it feels like most of the time. So I guess not being, federal court, it feels even more tilted in industry's favor than I'm that I'm used to. But I think we do have these really powerful tools in the legal system baked in that we can use as citizens to make a big impact. And so for me, that's been really exciting to learn about and really empowering and rewarding.
And well, we have another question from Linda Carso too that I think both of you can answer, and I'm going to put in my own plug too. Well, one is just how do we harness our environmental cause to the current energies for change that we're seeing being demonstrated in the streets around the world. Love to hear from both of you on that, and it just reminds me before we end up running out of time that I do want to say two things that I always tell people that they should do is number one, vote is one of the most important things you can do. Here's vote for the politicians that are going to actually walk the walk and the ones that aren't going to be in the pockets of all of the polluters. And number two, change happens at the local level. And so support change at the local level and act locally. A simple example that I tell people all the time is, we have a plastic bag ban here in New York. That didn't happen because the New York government decided to implement a plastic bag ban. It happened because communities got together, or people in communities got together, and they organized, and they got their town to implement a plastic bag ban. Then the next town did, then the next town did, until it got enough critical mass that the state did it statewide. And we know that the change happens at the local level. And so in addition to voting, support your local waterkeeper and take action at your local level. But I'll turn it over to you two to answer that question about harnessing our environmental cause to the current energies that are for change around the world right now.
Yeah, and interesting you should bring up change being at the local level, Mark, because here in Florida, I think our state has seen that as being too powerful. And what they have done is the state legislature has actually preempted local governments from doing things like passing plastic bag bans. So your local city is not allowed to ban water bottles or plastic bags or harmful herbicides, for example. And so they've sort of taken away that power from the local government to make those decisions essentially on behalf of industry that are lobbying at the state level. So that's been one of the big challenges. You even had it with like solar power here. That we're not allowed to sell solar energy back to the grid in Florida either. So that's been a big challenge that we've been working on it and coming up against quite a bit as well. We even wrote an amicus brief for the Florida Supreme Court in favor of my city, city of Coral Gables, going to the Supreme Court to say that the state's preemption of their plastic bag ban was unconstitutional. They ended up, unfortunately, overturning the plastic bag ban, which is very interesting and sad. But yeah, but to your question, Linda, I think that's a great question, and I think I'll start by saying I don't want to necessarily like shift the conversation of what these protests are about towards the environmental movement right now. I think it's really a time for us to be amplifying other voices, and we've quieted our channels a bit at Waterkeeper over the last few weeks as well to let other voices be heard, because I think the social justice movement right now is really deserving of a lot of attention from these protests, and we're trying to do our part to support them and their actions and their movement as well. But in terms of making change for the environmental movement, one of our county commissioners, Daniela Levine-Cava, has a quote that I think is very well said. She says, every day you can read something and educate yourself about an issue. And then once a week you can make a call about an issue. And then once a month you can write a letter. And if everybody did that to educate themselves and then communicate with their elected officials or people in their community about issues that are important to them, that will really add up to a lot of change in the long run too. And this is a critical year, and the more educated and informed people are, I think the better.
Yeah, I will say that it's first is during moments of crisis, there are two things, no? Like they're a catalyst of change, but it could also be a catalyst of change to make certain regulations on positions even more, like, even worse. So I will say, like, I will second first Rachel on how to on the whole protest of racial discrimination. I think it's really important to give voice to those social justice protests and do not put the environmental message on top of that. There are, at least in Peru, a lot of things that are connected to that, because there are a lot of minorities that have been affected by different issues, like indigenous people. So I think in that sense, it's completely valid, and it's important to make those voices also being heard at this moment. But on the other side, what I was going to say is that these are also moments of crisis where, at least in South America, we're already seeing how, because of the crisis, some environmental regulations are being weakened, and you've been seeing it also in the States with the politics being enabled by the president of the States, no? So I think this is the moment where we have to also, like, encourage people to be activists, and I have felt a lot of people feeling that when you call them an activist, they're kind of like they feel like an activist, someone like only from Greenpeace that is like going into a building and maybe in a ship in the middle of the ocean, and I always tell them, like, if you're not an activist, what are you? Are you you are indifferent? You're comfortably numb? You know, like making sure that an activist is what people want to see from other people, because at the end, there's a million of missions that we can do to change a society for the better, and it's just a matter of choosing one of them and pursue them, no? So I think it's like, I cannot find the word in English, but it's like changing the significance towards the positive significance of the words activist, no? And I think that comes also with what you said, Mark, of like talking about it at the local level, where you can see those changes happen and you don't feel overwhelmed by the magnitude of the scales of the actions. I think that is what the local action gives you, is the opportunity to do something where you feel a concrete result, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think if I can just add something really quickly before we wrap up too, and Bruno, you're absolutely right, and I don't at all mean to imply that that there are not racial injustice issues in the environmental movement as well, and that's a key piece of this puzzle as well. And we can't achieve the kind of justice and the better world that we're all working for at Waterkeeper without having the entire community, and particularly people of color and indigenous communities along with us as well. And there are deep environmental justice problems here, just even here in Miami and everywhere. And we're trying to do better about incorporating those messages and telling those stories and working on those issues as well as we move forward. And yeah, thank you for your question about that.
Yeah, thank you both. We're about out of time, so I'm just going to say we'll do a really quick, if you could deliver one message to the people of your watershed, what would it be?
Oh my goodness, Bruno's going first on this one.
It's a brief one.
I would just say, don't play battle. Like,
I think the technology might be.
each one of us playing their role.
We lost you there, Bruno.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, like, that we need to be hopeful, that I'm convinced that we can together, like, keep this river free flowing, but we need everyone to commit and engage to this cause, no? So it's just like whatever everyone is doing from what they can do, it's making a difference.
Yeah, and I think for me, I want people to really feel like a sense of ownership over their local waterways, and to understand that their waterways belong to them and that they have a right to clean water that they can defend.
And it's fun. let's also say that, like, sometimes it's like, okay, you're an environmental activist, like I have fun. I meet these amazing people, especially when you go to the Waterkeeper conference. So it's really like a matter of like making your life much worth it. You have more purpose. So I think we also have to encourage that it's a good path for your life.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Bruno. This is so much fun. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening, and we're really grateful to both of you for your time, your talents, what amazing things you bring to the world, and we're so grateful to know you. And
Thank you for including us.
thank you, everybody. And we'll be recording this so anybody can catch it later. Have
Thanks,
a good night.
Ian.
Thank you, Maya.
Thank you, Maya.